Hello and welcome to Speak Your Truth. This is the podcast where we pull back the curtains and we reveal the real truth about business, about God, about speaking, about whatever our topic is. And we've got another good one for you today. And my very special friend and guest speaker today is Byron Hack, and Byron is the Westcoast director for Glad Tidings India, a Christian nonprofit ministry. Byron liberates unenlightened people from India from the darkness of ignorance so they can become educated, improve their hygiene and sanitation, and create opportunities for a whole new world. So Byron is here today to share with all of us how we can bring hope to the hopeless. So how cool is that? Say that's cool. So welcome, Byron.
Thank you. Thank you, Arvee, for having me here today.
Welcome. Awesome. I'm so excited that you're on the show today. And I just, I've heard your story before, but I know that a lot of people haven't. And it's such a story that needs to get out there in the world. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved with Glad Tidings India.
Well, it goes back to 2006, and I went to a midweek Bible study at my church, and the pastor held up $600 bills and said, I want to give these $100 bills to people who want to make a difference for the kingdom. And I just wasn't in a place in my life where I wanted to volunteer for anything, and he pointed at me. And I looked around, and my daughter's got her hand up in the air, and she was in sixth grade, so very young. And he actually called her up there and gave her $100. And I was shocked that he would do that. and she came back and was like, Christina, what in the world are you going to do with that $100? And she wanted to use it to buy Bibles for the homeless that we serve at our church for 2 weeks in January during cold weather shelter. And so she used that money to grow it. And she bought little boxes and she passed those out to friends and family and asked them to collect spare change for a short time. And she ended up with more money than she needed to buy Bibles for the homeless. Mm-hmm. So, we have about 175 homeless that we serve each year. So she had that. So then the pastor gave her a brochure on the Bomaka, which was a primitive tribe in India that worshiped darkness. And they were totally uneducated. They had never heard of Jesus or the cross, the gospel. And so Glad Tidings India was going to bring literacy and the gospel to them by teaching women to read through Bible content literacy classes and sending children to children's Bible school. And so Christina was very excited. She wrote a letter and she sent off her extra money to Pennsylvania to Glad Tidings India and wrote that I want to help send kids to children's Bible school. And I got a call a short time later from the president of Glad Tidings India who said, wow, I want to thank you for this incredible gift from your daughter. I'd like to thank her. And as we talked, we realized that he would be coming out to California. So I invited him to our mission meeting and I said, at my church, and I said, I'll bring my daughter and you can share about what God is doing in India. And so he shares for about 20 minutes and then he says, we have a mission vision trip going to India in 3 months. If any of you would like to go, we'd love to have you, but we need to know in 2 weeks. And my daughter, 12 years old, raised her hand. And so on the way home, we talked about that. Christina, you cannot go to India by yourself. She's a very adventurous girl. We need to find out if you can miss school for 2 weeks in January, and if I can get out of work for 2 weeks, and if we can find the money for both of us to go, and if your mother will let us go, because this is India. It's not Indiana. And she was like, Dad, yeah, we'll have to pray about it. And so 2 weeks later, everything lined up and I was calling the GTI to say, yes, we're going. And that trip really changed my life. And during that trip, we saw amazing ministry. We saw what God was doing. We saw how lives and villages were just being transformed through education, through literacy, through the gospel. And part of that was to meet Dr. Bill Scott, who had gone to India in 1950. So he had already been there 65 plus years. Mm-hmm. And he had met his wife on the way there, the woman to be his wife. And one of our journeys, we were traveling from one city to Delhi to another city in India, and we missed our flight in Delhi. So we had to spend the night in the Delhi airport. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to go to sleep with my 12-year-old daughter here in this airport. And Dr. Scott said, I'll stay up with you. So we talked all night long, and I just heard, just more incredible stories and how God had protected them and provided for them and performed miracles with them and through them, through him and his wife, and through this ministry that they founded. And God got a piece of my heart that night for India. And we came back very excited and shared what we had seen. And Christine and I went back 2 years later in 2008, and we saw more fantastic ministry. And in 2014, there was another trip that was coming up, and my son was going to 8th grade, but I couldn't go. So I asked him to pray about it, and I asked my wife to pray about it. And they ended up going. And they came back changed. Joshua came back, and he wanted to raise $500,000 to send 1 million kids in India to children's Bible school. And I was just like, wow, that's a big goal, Josh. And so as a family, we just got more and more involved. And then Kathy ended up leading a trip in 2016, and I joined the board of directors and go every year. And we've become more and more involved to the point where it's a passion for Kathy and I to share this ministry and to get people here involved, making a difference for good and bringing hope to the hopeless, because it's incredible the difference that literacy and a little love makes.
Wow, that's an amazing story, Byron. Now, how many times have you been to India?
Seven.
Seven times.
7 times.
Wow. And each time you always come back with such incredible stories. Now, I know your ministry has been doing some powerful things. It's not just about women's in literacy or children's Bible study, but through those acts that they do, the ultimate win is you're bringing souls to Christ.
Right. Yeah, we do a lot with...
that's amazing.
Yeah, and we provide sewing machines and rickshaws for empowerment. We provide wells for villages that don't have access to clean water. These people may have to walk 5-10 kilometers to get water, and then water from a dirty pond, So we're bringing water through the bore wells, and then we're bringing the living water of Jesus through the Bible, right, and testimonies. And we train church planters in evangelism and discipleship and growing the church. And you just hear absolutely incredible stories every time I learn new things, and God kind of shows me new lessons.
And this last time that you went, which was just recently, you experienced something new that you hadn't experienced the other 6 times. Do you want to share what that is?
Yeah. So, whenever we go to these different ministry sites, and this happens every trip, we are honored and blessed by the people, and they give us gifts, they give us flowers. They are so excited to see us. Sometimes it's the first time they've ever seen a Westerner, and they're just so thankful. And then they share their stories. Sometimes they sing some songs they've learned, and it's in their language, right? And a translator helps us understand what's going on. And this time, the thing that really hit me was, wow, they are so thankful. And I'm the person receiving all that thanksgiving, right? But really, it's for people here in the U.S. that are making all that possible, because it wouldn't be possible if people here weren't praying and providing financial support to make ministry happen. And so, we talk about being blessed by blessing others. And it just hit me this time how grateful those people are that somebody in the U.S. cared enough to lift them out of the darkness of ignorance, to pull them out of a well of darkness, and so they could get, we talked about the light of literacy and the light of the gospel, that just opens up a whole new world for them and gives them hope for this life and the next, right?
Right. And pretty fantastic when they, they're many of these people you're talking about are very poor, and yet they spend, they gather, their community together and create these beautiful, flowered leis. And we're not talking about the flowered leis you see in Hawaii. We're talking about some pretty big, what you said, they were so heavy,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
They're like marigolds and other heavy flowers just shoved so close together.
Together.
And yeah. Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah. And then they'll give you, sometimes they give you other gifts too.
Mm-hmm. So how are you, Byron, getting that message out to the world, the message about literacy, women's literacy in India, and the message about the gospel, and the message about, donations to water wells and everything that they need? How are you getting that message out there?
Well, a variety of ways, but speaking is a big part of it, right? And so we've been really blessed to go through speaker training with you, which is great because my background is as a software developer and manager, and not exactly a lot of time or experience being on stage and talking to people. So very freeing and liberating to work with you. So thank you for the time that you've poured into us. And so speaking is a huge part of it. And then, of course, through social media and word of mouth, trying to work with churches, work with businesses, any door that God puts in front of us, we're going to knock on and see if it opens up, basically. And that can include events. We're having our banquet coming up in a couple of weeks, our GTI banquet. We've done comedy events and magic events. We do things with churches which we call Luke 19 projects, where we'll give the church enough money for everybody in the congregation to get $10 each. And then the idea is, like in Luke 19, the parable of the talents, they go spend 3 months trying to build that $10 into $30, $40, $50, $100, whatever they can do, and watch God multiply it, and then see what kind of ministry we can do. So there's speaking certainly is a great way to get the message out. And so all the different ways we can do that is a blessing. And like this podcast, right?
Right, absolutely. And, just keep doing that. Keep getting that message out to the world. Keep sharing it. And I know you've got a big year ahead of you, right? Because why don't you tell everybody a little bit about where Glad Tidings India is headed? I mean, you've got some big leaps some changes down the pike that you're getting ready to do. Can you share some of it?
Yeah. So we're going through a transition of leadership, and trying to move into the next stage, the next part of the relay race is a good way to look at it. And so, Dr. Scott and Joyce went to India in 1950. In 1975, they started the ministry over there. That's our partner ministry. In the 90s, they turned it over to the Indians and it's now a fully indigenous ministry, and it's running, and it's great, and it's got people with 40 years experience. On the U.S. side, we have the president of Glad Tidings India has been working with India, Dr. Scott, for 35, 40 years. And we're at a point where we want to start transitioning to that next generation of leadership. And we also are challenged by our partner in India to triple the amount of ministry we do. And so that means we need to grow beyond where we've been, right? And we've been growing in California. We have base in Pennsylvania and some of the eastern states. We need to go beyond that. And part of that includes a bigger social media and internet presence. Part of that means getting into other cities. And part of that involves having more time for travel and speaking, right? And so at this stage, I've gone from being a volunteer and spending the first basically 10 years of my time with Glad Tidings India, just volunteering my time while I worked a full-time job, to cutting back to 4 days a week at my job and then cutting back to 3 days a week at my job at the beginning of this year. And the plan currently, in the Lord's timing, is that, I would become full-time with Glad Tidings India. And there's some challenges with that. And we have a God that overcomes challenges, right? A God that can make miracles happen and can move mountains. And so it's kind of fun to sit back and watch him work. Of course, we have to put boots to the ground and do stuff to make things happen.
Right.
And we have to step out in faith and in trust and put in the sweat, and then watch him make things happen. So that's kind of where we're at. I don't know if I completely answered your question. But.
Yes, you did. And what I love about it is you are walking by faith, and you're obedient, and you're just going step at a time, and it's going to happen. But I wanted people to know that this isn't just some small little ministry. It's not like just you and Kathy ministry. This is a worldwide, nationwide effort to bring literacy to India. And before I met you, I had a different idea of Indians. I thought that, they're all computer geniuses, and never knew that there were these huge pockets of people that, that didn't, that they didn't wash their hair. Tell us the little story. Let's do some speak your truth here. Let's tell some real serious stories about some of the people you met.
Okay, and I want to preface it by India is a land of contrasts, right? And you kind of hit it there. India, so first off, you have to realize that they have 1.3 billion people, over 1.3 billion people. So a lot, right?
That's a lot of people.
It is. And they have the most of a lot of things. And that includes, they have lots of people that are very well educated and know computers and have great jobs. And they have lots of people that are very wealthy. But they also have this very large population of uneducated people. And some of that comes about because of the caste system. And some of that comes about because the emphasis hasn't been on educating everybody. And the government is making strides to make that different. They are working towards educating people and lifting people up. But the fact is that over 400 million people in India are illiterate. They don't know how to read or write. They can't count money. They can't function in society, right? India has the most number of illiterate people. India has the most number of people without access to clean water. India has the most number of children under the age of 5 that are malnourished. India has the most people living in modern day slavery. India has the most people in human trafficking, being human trafficked. And India has the most number of people who have never heard the name of Jesus Christ or don't know his story, right?
Right.
And so part of our message is we want to reduce that. We want to make those most not so most. So we want to move people from most to least, right?
Right.
And so through literacy and the gospel, we do a lot of work with people in tribal areas, in villages, remote villages, in slums, outcasts who may be called deletes, or 20 years ago they would have referred to them as untouchables. But people who have never been to school and don't understand the basics of sanitation and hygiene and nutrition and how to care for themselves. So a story from February, I went and I visited with this literacy class. So they were 5 months into their 10-month literacy class. It was a nomadic group. So they didn't have a set place where they lived. They would kind of move around. So, they're living in huts and tent huts and villages, that don't have a lot. And this woman stands up and she says, I'm 35 years old and I had never brushed my hair before literacy class, and I hadn't bathed, so she might have bathed like once every 3 weeks or something. She probably had never brushed her teeth either, right? And she just had never been taught. She had never been to school for sure, but she had never been taught just basic sanitation and hygiene. She was unimportant. So she was ignored. Their whole group was, their people group was. And so here, 5 months into literacy class, she could read. She was starting to read. She could write her name. she was beautiful. She had bathed, she could brush her hair, she had dignity and self-worth because now she understood that she was important and she was valued, and there's a God who loves her, right? And she didn't know anybody loved her.
Right.
And she had learned a skill. She was learning a skill to make brooms that then she could take to the market and sell so that she could provide income and provide for her family. And because she could count money, she wouldn't get ripped off. Because she could sign her name, she could open a savings account at a bank, and then the government, these people in this type of situation, they're unaware of what they're entitled to. And so they learn that, oh, the government will help us have housing, or the government will provide a road to our village, or a bus stop within walking distance, or electricity to our village, or we can get grants for clothes because they might only have 1 or 2 pairs of clothes, period. And just, it just creates whole new opportunities for them that they never even dreamed was possible. Another woman in a different class stood up and said, same deal. They weren't nomadic, but they were outcasts, right? So their people had not been to school at all. And she stood up and said, I did not even realize I was supposed to send my daughter to school.
Wow.
Right? And so she came to literacy class and she brought her 12-year-old daughter, and her 12-year-old daughter, these people are smart. They're very smart. They're just not giving the opportunity. Right?
They're not educated yet.
Yeah. And so this girl, this 12-year-old girl, had passed the 5th grade certification by the end of 10 months of literacy class. So that meant she could start attending regular school. And then the literacy teacher told her that you are eligible to apply for a scholarship. And so she applies for this scholarship, and out of thousands of girls, she got it. And it would pay her education through college. So
wow, that's wonderful.
You hear stories here about first person in a family going to college, but this is the first person in a people group of maybe 80,000 people that goes back generations, that had, so just absolutely incredible. And then, you could just go on and on and on with stories. One other, and I'll make it brief, but one lady stood up, her name was Lakshmi, and she talked about how she had her and her husband were impoverished and they couldn't make ends meet. And they met a man who told her that she could be a house servant in Kuwait and send money home. And so she agreed to do that after talking with her husband. And she went to another city, a big city in India, and she was drugged. And then she ended up in this other country. And immediately she was abused physically, mentally, and sexually. And the person who basically bought her even let his friends abuse her. And so she was tortured, right? And fortunately for her, some people from her the state that spoke the same language she did in India met her and were able to kind of rescue her and help her get freedom. And so she had come back to her village, and now Glad Tidings India, through our partner there, was bringing literacy to her village. And so she signed up for literacy classes. She learned to read and write. She learned songs of encouragement. Before literacy, she wrote us that she was close to committing suicide. Her husband and her were so depressed, and then they had debt on top of that they were just ready to give up, and because they had no hope, right? They were desperate. And so through literacy, she learned to read and write. And she learned that she was valued, and she learned about a self-help group. And through that self-help group, which would be like a group of women working together, that she could get a loan, basically a micro-enterprise loan, sponsored by the government through the local bank. And so her and her husband now were goat herders. And so they were able to provide for their family and participate in community life. And she was so grateful for what literacy had done for her, and to learn of a God who loved her and that she mattered. And she was still having issues with some of the memories. But what a change in her life that literacy and the gospel and awareness brought. It's much more than just literacy. It's really transformational as far as helping them to understand so much. And um, alcohol is a big problem for these tribal groups, and part of that is because they make their own alcohol. Sometimes that's poisonous.
It's poison, yeah.
Yeah, so they can end up dying. And part of that is it's an escape, right? They're drowned in their depression, their hopelessness, and so they may even give alcohol to their children, And then through literacy class, they find out that no, literacy is not. I mean, alcohol is not good. Cigarettes are not good. Child marriage is not good. They learn morals and ethics, and they learn better attitude and behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And so it ends up changing the village. Women are earning income for the first time. Women are getting involved in village politics for the first time. Men are learning to respect and treasure and value their wives, and the kids are learning. Kids are starting to go to school instead of working in the fields at age 8. Little girls are not getting married at age 12 and 13, and it's incredible.
It's a beautiful thing what you're doing. Beautiful thing. And I know we could talk about this all day, but our time is up. And, so it's so not, this is so important for everyone to know that, through literacy, everything happens, right? We get to learn about God. We get to learn about hygiene. We get to learn about, ethics and morals and things that we shouldn't do. So it's so important to help the people of India. So Byron, why don't you tell our listeners how they can help you with your ministry and help get more women? Is it just women that go through the literacy, or do men also?
We have so the literacy classes are intended for men and women ages 9 to 90, basically.
Okay, good.
But we talk about India having the most number of illiterate people, but women are a large percentage of that. Women are not valued. So there is a definite need and an emphasis that we place on women's literacy. So we have special women's literacy projects that are only women's literacy classes. And that could involve small girls down to age 9. But then we also have literacy classes for men that are men and women. So it's not exclusive by any means.
Good.
And then the sewing machines are provided for women who are some of the most impoverished, right? So they may be widows, or they may be orphans who need to care for younger children, or they may be facing incredible, they just can't make ends meet. So we provide sewing machines for them, and rickshaws for men. And instead of living on the streets and not eating, they're now able to pay off any debts they have and have a roof and provide a meal for their family. And when I talked about that debts, it's in a lot of cases, they work for landlords who then basically trick them into becoming indebted and becoming an indentured servant. And that's because they're not aware, right? And so literacy helps to prevent that kind of thing.
Right.
Or it helps them get out of it, because through literacy, they also learn a skill that helps them to usually at least double whatever they're making in income, or sometimes generate income for the first time.
Right.
So how to help? Yeah. Glad
how do people get a hold of you? How do they help send a woman to literacy class? And then again, you mentioned it, but the literacy class is a 10-month class, and these women, they go after the day is done. They go after.
Yeah, they're working during the day. They're providing a meal for their family if they have that. And then the literacy class is 10 months, 5 nights a week, 2 hours a night. So it's at the end of the day, right? And yet these women find a way to do that. Over 90% graduate, which
that's huge.
Yeah, and they do extra work on top of that outside of their class, and it's $25 to teach a woman to read.
One woman for 10 months. I mean, that's nothing.
Right, yeah. So you do $25 a month. That's 12 women a year, and we do on the order of about 7,000 women a year right now that we're providing literacy classes. And
wow.
triple that. We want to get up to 20 to 25,000 women a year. And that's a small piece of the amount that need it, but it's huge, right?
Right.
So gladtidingsindia.org. Glad, just like it sounds, G-L-A-D, tidings, T-I-D-I-N-G-S, India, INDIA.org is the website. You can scroll about halfway down the page, and there's a short video, about 2 minutes, Meet Kumari story that kind of gives you an idea about the impact. And that was filmed during one of our Mission Vision trips. So there you go.
Well, thank you so much, Byron. So there you have it. Go to gladtidingsindia.org. And also they do have a banquet coming up, and they have a lot of other events and shows coming up. So keep going back to the website, check them out, and come and just meet Byron and Kathy, and just help them to support India and to bring more people to Christ. That's what it's all about. And we're so glad you're doing something like that, because that means we don't have to, right? All we have to do is donate. So make sure you go to gladtidingsindia.org and help Byron and Kathy, help other women. All right, so we have to end for now, but I just like to always end with John 8:32. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So thank you, Byron, for being on the show. Thank you for all your wonderful stories. Thank you for your big heart in helping not only the women, but men and women of India, and the children and everybody else. It was so warm and touching. I'm so glad you're doing it. So glad that I can also be a part of it. So thank you for being on the show, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.